Okay, I think we can start our first official meeting. So welcome everyone. Thank you for your time that you decided to join us today. This is the first online event by Global Society. And what is Global Society, you may ask? So this is a newly funded NGO based in Poland that is focused on promoting global education and intercultural communication. So to say it simply, we are looking for providing opportunities for people all around the world to connect and learn from each other. And since this is our first event, the world is slowly opening after the pandemic, and people are hopefully starting to travel again and go to study abroad again. We decided to make the first meeting's topic how to make the most out of study abroad. And today we have an amazing speaker that will share all her knowledge with you. This is Elizabeth Gamarra. And you probably know something about Elizabeth already from the event description, but let me say something here. So Elizabeth is a TED speaker, Fulbrighter, and former Rotary Peace Fellow. She is currently a Japanese Government MEXT scholar and Ph.D. candidate at International Christian University in Japan. She is researching human security and migration. She has a double master's in the field of mental health and peace and conflict studies. She is also the founder of the Generation of Legacies, an initiative focused on minority empowerment. So Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today. And I'm giving the spotlight to you now.
Thank you so much, Maciej. It's such an honor to be here, especially knowing an initiative started by you, which you are somebody I admire a lot and have had the honor to work with through the Academic Council of the UN systems. So yes, I'm here for this wonderful event.
Okay, just one more information for everybody here. Please, we are already sorry for any technical difficulties that we're gonna face here because this is our first meeting, so we are still learning everything. So one more time, let me say it for everybody who just joined. This is gonna be recorded and available on our YouTube channel later. So feel free to show your face. You can also feel free to turn off your camera. You can communicate with us by raising your hand or typing your question in the chat. We already have some pre-registered questions that you submitted through the registration form, so we are going to talk about those later. But first, my first question to Elizabeth is if you could introduce yourself like in more details maybe, and tell us your story in general. How did it started? What motivated you to study abroad, to work abroad? Can you tell us something more about your adventures so far?
Yes. So I believe that everything started from home. My parents are Peruvian descent, and they're from the city of Cusco. And so I was born in Peru, and I was then raised in the U.S. in Utah, and then I pursued the majority of my education there. Within the field of mental health and a focus on women's health, as well as kind of the refugee community, kind of the refugee studies as well. And so at that point, I felt like I would stay there forever. I think I was really passionate about the work I was doing. I had a really great network of people already that I was working with. But then suddenly an opportunity actually came about to study or to kind of specialize in a couple courses in England. And I think that was the first time I went abroad. Well, we always go back to Peru as a way to stay in touch with our family, but this was like the first time going abroad to study and a topic in depth with a really nice cohort, and that experience just like completely changed my perspective about like working internationally and studying internationally, because back in Utah, the education was great, but at the same time, when you're abroad, it has so many other components. For example, the culture is much more deeply ingrained in you because you have to integrate into it. The language, you're not just studying about language, you're actually like being immersed in it, right? You have strange and good experiences with strangers who add to that kind of overall journey to yours. So there's so many components when you go abroad. And so when you come back, you can then apply all of that knowledge to your community. And so I think England was the first time I did that. And then it just continued on. And one of the things that I think I want to stress a lot is that studying abroad actually came from helping others. And so we usually think about us pursuing these opportunities out there, but a big part of that door opening was because one of my peers was trying to find some opportunity to specialize in conflict and conflict resolution and um, kind of the ontology of conflict. And so I wanted to find a course. So she asked for my help. And so I did. I tried to do some research and introduce her to some people. And in that process, I met great stakeholders who were like, oh yeah, this is possible, and you could apply as well. So we both ended up applying and actually getting funded to go. So it came really not from a place of me saying, okay, I want to do this. It came from more of a place like I want to help or support some of my peers who reached out to me. So in that sense, I think that was the maybe very unique aspect of my own experience. And then after that, after England, went to Greece, working in a refugee camp in Thessaloniki, and then in Geneva, in Switzerland, with the graduate school, working on a number of different issues, but it was mostly then with like international organizations, kind of the mechanisms of those and how they work. And then later on Japan, which I call my home for the moment. And that's been a while now. And within Japan, I was in China for a big chunk of my time studying the Belt Road Initiative and how that plays a role. So yeah, different experiences, but it all started in England. And I think the last one was in China before COVID.
Okay, thank you for that detailed introduction. Like now you all see why Elizabeth is our first speaker, because she has amazing experience and can share a lot with us. So I see like 2 people joined us now. So just for your information, this meeting is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel later. You can turn your camera on, you can turn your camera, stay turned off. And if you want to ask any question to Elizabeth, just raise your hand or you can type it also in the chat. Okay, so you visit like so many countries and you did a lot of things there. Can you tell me something about maybe culture shocks? Did you experience something like this? Because this is also important. I believe we talked about this already, like in the past, like people who are departing to different countries, they are sometimes not taking into account the fact that you mentioned that the culture is different, right? And sometimes they are facing some unpredicted difficulties resulting from those differences. So can you tell me something more about your culture shocks?
Yes. I think it's very important to meditate on culture shocks because it adds kind of that color or flavor to your experience in general. But yeah, I had many. And I think they're always really nice reminders of to stay humble in the whole process. I remember, like, let's take China, for instance. When I was here in Japan and I really wanted to study how the Belt Road Initiative, kind of the BRI, played out in the long term, and the opportunity to study in Beijing opened up. And so when I traveled there, I believe I had assumed that maybe China and Japan share more in common than I thought, and it's very different. Even Beijing itself has like a different atmosphere than any other parts of China. Like some people even said that if you're in Beijing, it's not necessarily China. And so those conversations were very interesting. So I would say the atmosphere in Japan, I was very shocked at the at how orderly things were. I did my Fulbright in Spain, and so in Spain everything is much slower. Everything, you kind of slow down, it's more relaxing. Like the stores and everything closes for siesta, which is break time, right? And they take their time, and then they also have a puentes, which is in Spanish means bridges. So they have these like vacation times, and then they have the bridge, which they make longer their vacations. So things like that. I came from a very like laid back place to some extent, and then I came to Japan later on other countries, but that switch was really hard because in Japan, right, the train works on time. If you are 5 minutes early, you're already considered late to some extent. Being polite is extremely important, and there's different ways of being polite. Um, the way you address someone actually in Japanese says a lot about the kind of relationship you both have right from the very start. So I think kind of that switch was really interesting for me. And I think you also get to bond with a lot of people, right? Because when you study abroad, something very important is to have some network, build some sort of friendship and community. And so a really key bonding moment is sharing those experiences, right? Oh, like even if they're very small, I think that connects you really well to people who are kind of also struggling in that area. um Even one other one that I'm thinking off the top of my head is even like manners when it comes to uh, food etiquette, you know, what you're expected to do, what you're expected to say, how to greet someone, how to not greet someone, and those little things really matter, and they matter a lot. And so I think people, wherever you go in any country, if they see you put some effort into it, I think they appreciate it, even if it's not good, if it's not perfect. There is this long sense of like appreciation and then greater connection. So yeah, I wanted to share those quick experiences.
Okay, thank you so much. And when just staying in the topic of culture shocks, we have some participants who are especially interested in Japan here, so we can ask like
Okay.
one more question about that. I'm just
Yeah.
curious, was there anything about Japan or any other country is also fine, uh, that you heard um, before visiting this country, and when you actually visited, it turned out to be completely not true?
Mm.
Some false stereotypes that you face, maybe?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think with Japan, I think Japan is the perfect place to study at some point in your life. So you should definitely come here, even if you do some sort of course, even some sort of webinar or conference, or even a year living in Japan. I think it's really central. The same I would say for China or even like India. But I think Japan is very important. So if it's in your radar, I think you're in a good direction. I think for me, when I was prepping to come, I had this maybe idea of like Japan would be full of robots and they would be the future, and people wouldn't I don't know, it was more like I don't know, more of a Hollywood view of it. But I think Japanese culture, when you come here, it's very different. Of course, there are robots in some universities, in some restaurants, but in other ones there aren't, and people still use fax, which surprised me a lot in certain areas, and they do like paperwork. So they're very strict about the paperwork and following the rules, and I think that's really great. I think that teaches me a lot. But yeah, but I went from this very like Hollywood idea of Japan future robots to like no, realizing that there are so many regions of Japan with a different culture itself, right? So if you go to Osaka, the language, the way people treat you, the way they talk to you, it's very different than if you're in Tokyo. And then if you are in Hokkaido versus Okinawa, they all share their history and own mannerisms of doing things. And another thing that was really interesting to me is I thought that I would not meet so many hafus, which are like people who are half Japanese and half non-Japanese, because I wouldn't see them reflected a lot in the literature I was reading or in some part of the movies that I was trying to see. But in Japan, there is actually a big community of people who are half Japanese, maybe half Polish or half Japanese and half like Brazilian, and how they kind of navigate that to me is very inspiring, and I learn a lot from that. And there's also a very interesting kind of aspect that I haven't thought about a lot, was how there's a lot of returnees, people who are Japanese, born and raised abroad, and then now returning back to kind of reunite with their roots. And so they're also exploring Japan and learning the language, learning the culture, even though they have roots, right? Japanese roots. So that just speaks to, I think, the complexity of a country, and not to stereotype, of course, and to define the beauty and uniqueness of every single region. So that's a little bit about what came through my mind.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
I will just take a break for a moment also because I see like more people joining us. So just again, information for you. This meeting is being recorded, so don't worry if you joined late. You are not missing anything because it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel later. And you can turn your camera on. You can keep it off. If you have any question to our speaker, to Elizabeth, you can raise your hand or type it in the chat. This is also fine. Okay, so going back to the discussion, yes, this is what you shared about the society in Japan. This is very valuable. Thank you for sharing this. And you mentioned something that is actually related to my next question, like creating a network and being in a certain group of people. And I wonder if you can share some advices for people
Yeah.
who are coming to the foreign country and are looking for let me say experiences other than studying, just to do something interesting, gain some work experience maybe. Um, what would be your advice about networking by studying
Yeah,
abroad?
no. Yeah, I think that that's a great question, Majid, and one that I'm really passionate about because I've had a really great mentors who've really provided me wonderful insights about this. So I think that when I first came, I spent the majority of my time in the library, which was not good. I think that was nice maybe academically, but then realized entering my second year that is something I should continue doing, but there should be a balance between studying and also kind of finding this kind of personal journey outside of the classroom. And so um, yeah, I think there's a very great quote that says that you are the average of the 5 people that you hang out around with the most. And so I believe that is very important when you really select the people that you will hang out with every day, and will influence your decisions and shape you long term. So it's incredibly important to know and select those people wisely. There is the 33.3% rule. It's not mine. It's already well established, but it says that you need at least 33%, 33.3% of people that you're helping, that you're connecting them with. You have a network, people, and this person really needs help. Okay, so I can introduce you to this person. And then the next level is people who don't necessarily need those connections for help, but you share connections, like you could exchange, like, I'll present you to this person, maybe you present me to this other person. And it's more of a level type of network relationship. And then the last kind are people who are like 10 years ahead of you, doing everything you want to be doing in the future. And those are the people you should really kind of reach out to be the people who advise you and kind of help you. And one thing I want to stress that I learned a lot in Japan was that oftentimes we meet somebody, we really like them, and then we find maybe one area that they can help us, and we ask. And I think that's great, and I don't discourage that. But usually I think the approach that I've taken, and it's worked, is when I meet somebody, I don't necessarily care about their title or their background, or I do a little bit, but not what they can do for me. I try to build some sort of kind of solution oriented persona. So if I ask them what their problem is, like not what their problem is, but if they're having any issues, or anything that they're struggling with, and they say, actually, yeah, I can't find this person for this conference, or yeah, I'm really struggling to find a title for this, or it can be very small, it can be very big, and then I'm like, great, I can help you solve it in 1, 2, 3, 4. And so that eventually creates this people know you as somebody who is a problem solver, and they come to you, and your network becomes strengthened naturally. It just because you meet 1,000 people and you exchange cards with 100 of them, you have a 100 network of people, powerful people. That is incorrect. You have zero. And it is if you switch this other approach that you will have naturally a wonderful network, one that is supportive and one that will help you reach your goals. So that's something I learned here. through some of my own personal relationships, because my kind of network is half Japanese and half non-Japanese, because in the Japanese world it's a little bit different. I think it's less about exchanging information and helping each other. It has more of a, in Japan, I feel it has much more of a structure and much more of like a hierarchy that you need to be aware of. So in that case, that's a little bit different. But I think those would be the couple things that I would share in terms of networking. One book that I highly recommend that I really love is one, maybe I can put the link to it, but it's called Never Eat Alone. It's really old, but it shares a real, it's basically the thesis is to never eat alone, and it talks about how every opportunity is so precious. And how if you take a chance to meet somebody at a much deeper level every day, maybe add one person a week, then your network will expand so much and in a very nice, intentional way. It's by Keith Ferrazzi. You can probably buy it. It's I read it at least once every year, and I think it's a really good book. So that's a resource in case you want to check it out. I'll put the link below. But that I think that's all I have to share.
Okay, thank you. So if you could type the link to the chat, if possible.
Yeah, it's right there. You go, right there for everyone to see. It's in the chat.
Okay,
Highly,
so
highly
yeah, we
recommend
have it
it.
in the chat. I will, for those who are watching us on YouTube later, I will put it in the video description so you can still access it. Mm, yeah, another thing that you mentioned that I want to, talk about a little bit more is that your network is like half Japanese and half non-Japanese, and this is because for those who don't know me, I was also for a couple of years a student in Japan, and this is where we actually met with Elizabeth. And my impression was that sometimes there are foreigners in Japan who kind of avoid spending time with other foreigners. Instead of they prefer to talk only to Japanese people. Uh, and sometimes there is like the other type of people that they refuse to spend time with Japanese and talk only to foreigners. And what is your view on what would be your advice? Like maybe you already gave this advice, but generally, what do you think? Did you meet that kind of people? Did you notice that? That
Yeah. No, I think that's such an excellent question. And yes, actually, I met my GH in one international trip. And I think I was so lucky I scored, because it was I've learned so much from him, and his way of interacting is so inspiring. So just let me put that on record. But yeah, no, the question
thank you so
about
much.
like the percentage of foreigners and the percentage of Japanese, and I think that, to be honest, it depends on vibe. I believe more than anything, it depends on your vibe and your way of thinking. So I thought initially I had many stereotypes about Japanese people. Like, okay, they're shy, they're rigid. So when I met somebody, that was the immediate lens I saw them from. But eventually I think that I really learned super quickly that is incorrect. Because I go to a school where they don't, like, a Japanese person doesn't fit the traditional mold, especially in my environment. So I kind of got rid of that frame. And so when I met somebody, um it was more of their aura and their energy that then spoke to me, sometimes, because I'm from the US, maybe I get away from it, but I'm super friendly, and so they immediately knew I was from the US, and so we bonded over maybe their desire to go abroad as well, and what they like about the US, what they don't like about the US, and you slowly, through like very simple conversation, um you get to know their style a little bit more. Okay, this person seems like, how there's different personality tests, like this person seems to be very extrovert, introvert, this is their form of communication. So I always interpreted that as like a data point that then I can then use to better communicate with this person, because no matter what, this person has a strength, and they're admirable, they're warm, and maybe their communication isn't the same, but I want them as a friend, and so I will do my best to adjust and kind of figure it out. And of course, in that process, I've been wrong and I've been right, but um yeah, I think what I do is I approach both sides. I believe there's value in approaching both sides. and not being held back by our like preconceived notions of what they're like, but instead of the energy that they possess. And I think from the very beginning, you can tell a person's like strengths, um, by the way they speak, by the way they interact. And so I think one thing I've done is I was very observant of all of those, and then I've selected kind of the people that I think would complement me, and I know that I can maybe contribute to their lives and they could contribute to mine, and then really pursue those relationships to the fullest. Because if there's a room of 100 people and I want to be friends with 100 people, I'll go and say hello, 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 but it won't feel genuine, right? It'll just be like, okay, another hello, and I don't remember her name. But if I have 100 people and I kind of vibe with maybe 10 of them, and there could maybe out of those 10, 5 are the communication style that I prefer, and maybe one is one that I would do my best to adjust to, then I target those 6 people and I befriend them. And if they don't want my friendship, it's okay. If they do, then we can kind of see how that goes, and we build each other up. And I think that that's much more of a better way to address any sort of relationship in and outside of Japan. Um, but yeah, it's a whole process, and it works sometimes, it doesn't work other times. But I think you should approach both. I don't think you should have one sort of click, for sure.
Yes, exactly. This is also what I'm usually telling people who are asking for my advice, to not kind of not end up in some like closed cycle of people who just get out of your comfort zone, right? Because I also met like many people, many of my friends who just didn't really want to interact with people much, and they missed out on really nice opportunities while being there. So this is advice for both of us, to all participants. Uh, do a lot of networking and meet new people all the time. And never
Exactly.
eat, never eat alone, as the book says.
The
Yeah.
third one, the third one. And one thing I'd like to add to that is, I think what the precious thing of doing this is that opportunities will come to you, right? So if you're open about what you want to do in the future, or at least have some sort of vague idea, and you communicate that in a very passionate and genuine way, and you're there supporting others, um, then I think opportunities will come to you regardless. So I used to sit down and look at fellowships and scholarships and do my timelines and be like, okay, I'm going to do all these, but figure out the opportunities by myself. I actually like set apart from my calendar maybe 2 hours, and like nonstop, super concentrated. Wake up super early, sometimes 6 in the morning to 8, and then just dedicate that one day. And it was great, but it was also like I often wonder, like, what am I missing? Maybe like are there things that I don't even know exist? But when you connect with people in those ways, like they think of you. They're like, oh, actually, I saw this really cool scholarship thing, you should apply, and they send it your way. Oh, actually, I think you should be nominated for this, and you should think about this. They send it your way. And then at the end you have like an email with a bunch of possible opportunities, and you have deadlines, and you have people there to be like, hey, if you need anything, I can look at your paper, I can do this, I can do that, I can connect you with someone, people who would be there to motivate you. So that list doesn't become a list, it becomes like this list of people who are there super supportive, so you have some gratitude and you're happy, and you have these like opportunities that blow your mind that you wouldn't think even exist if this person didn't tell you. And some of these opportunities include like free trips fully covered for you to be able to learn this skill, or this conference that will change your life, or this funding opportunity that you could only have if you were in this particular Facebook group and know these particular people. So it's I think a ripple effect. So a big benefit is that like whatever you throw will come back at you in many, many, many ways. So just wanted to make sure I add that.
Okay, thank you so much for adding this useful information. And I think another question that I have is related to the current situation with pandemic that will be gone very soon, hopefully.
Mhm.
But as we both know, and everybody knows, there were many people who were working really hard to go study abroad 2 years ago, and of course they had to change their plans due to the whole situation around the world,
Yes.
and they finally have a chance to go back to be back on track after those 2 years. So I wonder, do you have any, on top of everything that you already said, do you have any specific advices for those people um, who are starting over right now after the pandemic with their adventures?
Yes, yes. I think so with the pandemic, I'm an advocate for opportunities through the pandemic because through the pandemic, you could study abroad, quotation marks, study abroad online and be in like two universities at once, or pursue these maybe virtual tours, or I don't know, the opportunity is limitless. So one thing that I struggled with to understand was a lot of my friends were getting these offers from really prestigious institutions, and I'd ask them like, would you go, but you wouldn't build any network and it would just be a paper. So would it be worth it? And it was kind of a split, and I agree with both. Half of them said no, it wouldn't be worth it because my style of learning is different, and I want to be there. I want those connections. I don't want the paper, I want the connection. But then other people, and these were usually the people who were very networky savvy and kind of knew about all the resources on campus already, so they had that kind of personality. But the other half of the people were people who said, to be honest, it actually saves me a bunch of money. Saves me from that cultural shock, because when you go to a country, you have at least 2 months where you're like shocked, and then you have withdrawal of like wanting to go back home. So you don't have to go through that. And their timeline isn't pushed back, right? Because they want to get a job after, so they need that degree. And whatever, virtually or non-virtually, the university is still an institution where they're going to get their diploma from. So I found both arguments very, 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 very appealing. And I agree with both arguments. But now that we're kind of going back to face to face, or maybe Japan is opening up and other countries are accepting more students, I think the very first thing to start is reflect what you did in those 2 years. Reflect and maximize on it. So if you feel like you didn't do much, then really try to reflect. What did you do? What does not much look like? Because those experiences in those 2 years that have passed will be incredibly important for you to be able to then apply and showcase to things that open up later. And one other thing is kind of try to build a story around it. I think everybody experienced the pandemic very differently. And so we think about it maybe like, okay, people struggled, people stayed home, period. But that looks different for everybody. Everybody has their own story, right? And so when you're applying for future talks or conferences or some sort of like project initiative, you can start with that. You can start with how how it uniquely impacted you, and how out of that you have been proactive and active, and something came out of it. Perhaps it was a dialogue that you had on Zoom for this particular issue you're passionate about. That shows a lot of dedication. Maybe it was this startup idea that you had. Instead of saying, yeah, I came up with this startup idea yesterday, you could say, actually, there's a history of it during the pandemic, and this is my idea. It has some sort of legitimacy and holds that a little bit more. And so I think if you're able to really reflect on those 2 years wisely and apply them, build a story, build that is part of your narrative, and then utilize that to then apply for things and pursue things, then that would be excellent. And a lot of the opportunities are a year before they're due. So for example, right now, people are applying for 2025, 2020, like the end of 2024. So knowing your timeline, right? Even if we were in the pandemic, we are in the pandemic, like life continues. A lot of the deadlines that you're supposed to know about are due around now for next year, and so being aware of that will be very important. So I would say use it as a strength, and try to maximize it to the fullest. um and another thing I would try to do as well is yeah, like, you have, yeah, in this whole process of self-reflection, finding like what makes you unique. You've had this like 2 years to explore to some extent, and everybody will ask you what makes you special. Why you should get this study abroad, fully funded, amazing professors, the best classes in the world. Like, why you? Why should we choose you, right? Why are you better than this other person? So or not, like, but you would really have to craft maybe a really unique story and really good reasons for why you are destined for that. So in that sense, like, as my last point is, during this time that we've all been through, like, if you're able to craft that into something very powerful, then I think you're off to a really good start. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, yes, of course, it makes sense. And you already started answering one of my next questions. We have two more, because the next question is, what do you believe is the most important in your background of a person who's applying for a scholarship or something similar to include on a personal statement while you are applying?
To make it personal, I think that's the biggest issue everybody has. um People write personal statements, and it's almost like a resume, a list of all the things they've done in their life. It's almost like a transcript of what your resume is saying, and that is so wrong. Of course, it's impressive that you can mention, of course, in your personal statement the highlights of some of your resume experiences, but a personal statement should be personal. It should be something that somebody reads and they feel like they know you to some extent. They feel close to you, they feel connected, and they're eager to meet you. So it should follow a very unique structure. And in that process, another big problem, besides the whole like listing your resume, is that I see is that people don't show. So it's tell versus show. They say, I am, let's see, somebody in the call, I am Mary Medina, or I am Sabah, but, and I'm responsible, and I am somebody with great initiative, and I am somebody with passion. That's great, like you claim that, but how do I really know? So instead of saying that, saying I'm responsible, passionate, and with great initiative, you give me an example, right? For example, so during the pandemic, or yes, last year, there was this problem in my community. I was really concerned about it because this is something that I'm particularly passionate about, and I wanted to do something about it. So I organized a group of people. I did this, and the outcomes were this. At the end, my community was able to serve 400 homes and whatever. So in no place do you say I'm responsible and self-initiative. You're showing that you are, like, the person is just hearing the story and is saying like, wow, this person really shows initiative, wow, this person really shows passion. So those are the best personal statements, the ones you don't have to tell, the ones that you show through a story. And that's why I think storytelling is one of the best skills you should have at some point, or you should develop. So I think that's the next point. And maybe the last point is that a personal statement is just part of the bigger picture. So a lot of applications will ask you a personal statement, a resume, and letters of recommendation. And personal statements have maximum maybe 800 words, 500 words, 1,000 words if you're lucky. And so what happens if you don't get everything you want to say in there? Like, oh, I really did this really great thing at the embassy, but it would look really weird if I just mention it randomly. It will kind of take away from the vibe. So what I've done in the past is, with the people who are writing my recommendation letters, I would tell them like, hey, I would really value if you mentioned the work we did here. And so I don't get to see my recommendation letters because it's better if I don't see them. But the person knows that I would appreciate if they mentioned maybe this example that really touched me, right? So in that sense, when the person reviewing your application gets it, they see a really strong personal statement, they see an impressive resume, and then they see such a beautiful letter that complements what you wrote in your personal statement. And you didn't even have to mention it because it's the person, the recommender, kind of talking about it and elaborating on it. So it becomes this very nice, like, puzzle that kind of comes together at the end of the day. So those three would be the main things that come with it. And I think I have some examples. I remember I was working on my Fulbright, and that's something I worked for so long, for like a couple months to craft one personal statement that I was happy with, and that took maybe like 40 drafts. But I learned a lot in that process, and then it was definitely worth it.
Thank you. Those are great advices for everybody who are preparing some personal statements or applications for scholarships or whatever you are applying for. And let me see. My last question, I think, will be, What are the techniques and strategies to secure funding for doctoral programs in other countries? What do you think?
No, that's a great question. So the biggest advice is never do a doctorate if they're not paying you. Obviously there's some situations where that's not possible, and I understand, but a PhD should be paid and you should be paid for pursuing one. So there's always funding, and it works differently for different countries actually. So for the US, usually if you get into a PhD program, it's funded because they're funding you, but how do you say this? It's longer, right? So the funding there perhaps is only 2 years or 3 years. So you have to read really closely, um, like what they're expecting of you. So as a response of being funded in the US for a PhD program, for example, people have to teach. They have to give seminars and teach. And teaching is a lot of extra work. You have to be grading, you have to create your syllabus. Like there is this teaching role that you have to take on. So you have to be very clear about that. In other parts of the world, like the Europe or even Japan follows the model in the UK where it's about 3 years, maximum 4 years, um, where funding happens in different ways. So the number one that's really well known is the Munkasho, the Max, the government fellows, government scholarship. And you're all eligible to apply, to be honest. I think it's one of the best scholarships that permit you to go from a master's to a PhD. So they fund your master's and then they fund your PhD. But if you already have a master's and that's not what you're applying for, they can immediately fund your PhD. And so in that sense, they offer, they pay the tuition and then they give you a nice stipend. And the nice thing about Japan and I think the UK is that they have a different system. So you don't have to take so many courses as in the US, or even in South America if you're interested in there. But you immediately go to your candidacy papers, you know. So you have to write three candidacy papers. After you pass that through the exam, you're considered a doctoral candidate, which means you're going to move forward with the program. You know, it shows your analytical skills, and then from there you defend your proposal, and then you actually write you write your dissertation. So it's more realistic and more to the point, I believe. And MEXT kind of covers that for at least 3 years. Another way to get a PhD funded is through, I think, the Fulbright program. If you're interested in the US, to travel there. There's also the American Japanese Council. They do some sort of part like they do some funding opportunities for as well. There's so many, like there's one where if you commit to like working for certain organizations after you graduate, they cover half of it or they cover the majority of it, but then you have to decide, oh, do I really want that? One thing I would really consider for before you even do a PhD is knowing like why you're doing it, right? um like because there are some really amazing programs that after you do your master's and before you pursue a master's, for example, um organizations like the OECD have the young fellowship, the young associate program, which is 2 years working in France, getting like amazing experience with an amazing or a fine salary, and then going into a master's program. But they only accept undergraduates, you know. So like, so when you apply to PhD or master's, you know, you're gonna say but like sayonara to like bye bye to these other things, right? And so when you're in a master's and you want to go to a PhD, there are some programs that are like research associate affiliations that don't want PhDs. And so you know that when you apply to a PhD, you say goodbye to those chances too, right? And so when you're a PhD, there's also programs that say, and you're considering a postdoc, there's also programs like that. So I would say there's a list of, just to sum it up, because I might be getting out of track, but there's a list of funding opportunities. So funding your PhD is 100% possible, but I would also encourage you to look at the kind of programs between both your bachelor's, your master's, and your doctorate, and take advantage of those if you fit the age requirement, if you fit the nationality requirement, and if you if you have fit the education as well. So I would be very conscientious about that. um and one other thing is, when you apply, it's you can apply in many ways, because the next one, for example, um when you fill it out, I think it's very similar to like the Fulbright one, like certain aspects of it. So you could kill like two applications in one shot. um and that's very similar to other applications, so you could do many of them at the same time. and you can take advantage and maximize your time, not just wait for one because that's your chance. And if you don't apply to this, then it's over. You have to wait next year. I would say that's putting your, I think the saying is putting your eggs in just one basket. Make sure you cover your bases in many ways. If this PhD doesn't go, then what am I going to do next? Oh, this cool associate program. If this doesn't go, then what am I going to do next? And this is why the whole concept of network is important, because then people are kind of throwing opportunities your way, and you have a bunch of things to consider, especially for your future.
Okay, thank you for your very long and very valuable answer.
Mm.
I wonder, are there any questions from our live audience? Anybody wants to ask something? Okay, I don't see any for now. So let me ask something else. Okay, so part of the reason why the okay, we have a question. Can you see it in the chat, Elizabeth? So
Yeah.
the question is, how do you balance everything?
That's a good question. Like, especially with applications, right? Because they have deadlines. Um, that's a good question, Miss Ang. So yeah, I think balance. I think there. What I like to think is that if you want it, you can always make time for it. Everybody has time. Everybody has the same hours. It's just how you decide to spend that, and how intentional you are about your schedule and the commitments there. So I think what I usually tend to do is obviously be focused on my research and meet the deadlines that I have to. That's priority number one. But priority number two is make sure that like the scholarship fellowship hunting is always here in my mind. It's always like make it a hobby. Like today you could just say today I'm gonna have fun and just look up what new scholarships are out there. Make it a habit to see what is out there. Make it a habit to remember the deadlines, and at the same time think about it as a process of like job. So when I sit down and work on an application, I don't see it as, oh, I might get it, I might not get it. Is it a waste of time? Is it not a waste of time? You see it as like actually working. You're like, okay, I'm spending 2 or 3 hours on this, and it's like maybe 1,000,000 yen. If I get it, I'd be technically paying myself more than the average of what I'd be making in a part-time job. So I think it's good. So if you think about it as that, as like a proper job, if you get it, once you get it, then I think it's easier to balance, because that mentality will help you. But it's just being organized, I think, and it goes back to basic skills of knowing what your style is. If you're knowing yourself more than anything, and being truthful to yourself about what you can handle and what you cannot handle. But yeah, balance is very important. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, of course, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. So, okay, I'm gonna come back to my last question. If anybody else has a question, feel free to interrupt me and ask in the chat. We're gonna answer this. So, yes, as I was saying, part of the reason why the organization Global Society exists is that me and other co-founders, we felt that there are many people who would like to do something interesting abroad, start the international journey, but for any reasons, they might just not get any information about how to do this. Many of them might not even know that it's possible to go study abroad. Some of them might be even discouraged from doing this. That actually happened in my case also, because before I started studying in my environment, I heard many voices that it's actually not so good to go to even travel abroad. You should just stay here where you live and focus on your normal life, let's say. Some people might say it. So what would you say, how let's say there is a person who lived in that very closed environment, and they consider going to study abroad, but they might not really know if they really want or not. So what would you say to that person? How would you encourage somebody like this?
No, that's a very valid point. I think that question resonates with me because Utah is especially Salt Lake, I think is a small community to some extent, and I was very scared, to be honest, of going abroad for the first time. But I think one thing that is extremely important to remember is that if you feel like you've reached the heights of knowledge, or maybe you're progressing, just imagine how better it can get. That's the thought that comes to my mind. If you're studying, if you're working, and you think, wow, like I love this, um then to some extent you could also imagine that um, kind of doing that in another environment will help you grow in many ways, because I think studying abroad helps you kind of discover yourself in several ways. So that self-awareness, I think, is incredibly important, and these vehicles or channels are ways for you to reconnect with yourself. So in that sense, if you're timid or you're shy or anxious, then kind of explore why. Is it because of the language? Then get working on language studying. Is it because of the friendships or network? Then you could read up and maybe reach out to people on Zoom. Is it because you feel like you don't have enough money? Then start working on applications for funding, which is definitely possible. And so I would say get to the root of maybe where that fear comes from, and then at the same time surround yourself with people who would support you going abroad. It doesn't even need to be for 2 years. It could be for a year. It could be for some people leave here for a month, and come back completely changed. And then explore those chances. Maybe you're somebody who a year is too much. That's overwhelming. So then explore a couple ones that would work for a month, and then from there, um, go and pursue what would work for you. One important thing is that for some really competitive scholarships that would actually be super generous for you to pursue your education, they require field work. They require you experience outside of your home country. So they actually ask you, how many years have you been out of maybe Poland or the US? What locations have you been, and how long have you been? And that's one, for example, they ask for Rotary. You have to put the city, the dates, the country, because they want to show that they want people who, once you get here, you don't freeze and you're like, oh my gosh, I miss my home, goodbye, and then you ditch, right? It gives some sort of maturity that this person has the skill to integrate into a community, won't freak out, or knows how to settle in a new country. So it's very important in that sense. So if you look at it from that angle strategically, it's a must. And it depends on what you're studying. For example, if you're doing biology, or if you're doing international relations, and maybe you are in the best country in the world to study this theme, but you find somebody outside of your country where you want to study under them, you want them to mentor you, you want to publish with them or whatever, and they happen to be in another country, then that's an opportunity you shouldn't miss, because it will add complete richness to what you will be able to bring to any job or community or space. So in that sense, it's always it's also very helpful for what you decide to bring forward. So I would say a combination of all of those three things I just said.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have one more question in our chat. Let me read it. So, how your personal life changed, mm, I believe, before going out of US, and where are you now in terms of family, friends, purpose of life, opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's changed me a lot, like it would have for anybody. It's changed my way of viewing many things. I used to think, I don't know, I used to look at my life and know, okay, these are the things I will accomplish by this age. But then the more people you meet, the more you get to travel, the more you get to reflect, the more you see that that path is less like this and more like this. So that's where I am. I'm trying to find my path a little bit more. I do have concrete goals of what I want to do in the future, which is mostly in the government sector of the United States. But before that, I would love to get good at research. Before that, I'd love to gain some experience in the teaching world. Right now, for example, I'm working with different organizations focused on peace building. I have the great honor to work with Majid in all those activities. Um, and also before that, I was helping to do some speech writing for some peace related talks on with Timor Leste and Indonesia. So that was an experience, an opportunity that I think was very precious too. And before that, many other things. But I think one thing that I just like to stress is that um, it's like not being home has made me reflect of how much I miss my family for sure, but also on how many more things I should at least try to do. So it opens your mind in many ways. And there's a beautiful quote that says, if your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. So I think that's a nice reminder to say, to shoot for the stars and to um not just stay in the realistic bubble, but really stay in the potential bubble, and see everything as an opportunity despite maybe the odds being against you, or you being seeing it as not maybe possible, but just going for it in whatever way.
Okay, thank you so much. I will also send you a link to something in the chat, because at the beginning of our meeting I mentioned that Elizabeth is also a TED speaker, and she gave a really beautiful TED speech about, let me see, what was the topic? Uh, does
Just
pain
pain.
have to be painful, right? Yeah, and this is, I will link it down here for you, because this is very inspiring, I believe. So it will greatly expand on your story that you told us today and all the questions that you answered. Mm, and okay, I think we are getting close to 1 hour of our meeting.
Yeah.
Unless there are any more questions, you still have some time to type in the chat if you want to ask something. And I would ask, sorry, I would like to ask one more thing, Elizabeth. If there is anything that you would like to add just from yourself, anything that we didn't talk about and you think might be important.
Yes, yes. One thing I would like to add is that I believe the initiative that Manjij has pushed forward is incredible. Right. I think global society embodies so much from, I think, realizing the importance of how we are connected to this world in many ways, to being active and proactive and doing something about it, and really building a nice network, a true genuine network of people who can help each other. So I'm really happy about the start of this wonderful project, and I'm here to support always. And I would say, like, yeah, invite your friends. I think um because of the crazy network of Majid, you have like Japan, and you have other countries that he's connected with through the peace projects that he's part of. And you're tapping into an incredible human being for sure, but also an incredible network of countless opportunities. That's all.
Thank you so much for that amazing advertisement of global society. Um, I'm still gonna say something at the end of our meeting to introduce our organization better, but I see we have one more question. So this is a long one, so let me read everything. So okay, hello. I really valued your put your egg in many baskets comment. My question is, how do you go about knowing who to ask for a letter of recommendation?
Lost Majid. Now he's back.
I'm
And
so
he's,
sorry, you lost me. I'm back.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, yeah,
no, it's
some
okay.
yeah. Please forgive us all the technical problems, because this is
Yeah,
our
no
first
problem.
meeting. Let me just go back to you. You can see me, right?
Yes, and I think
Mhm.
eto Ako-san raised a good question. So should I reply to that?
Yeah, just let me wait. Where am I? I'm not- okay, I'm back, I believe. So yeah, let me come back to this question. Uh, how do you go about knowing who to ask for a letter of recommendation? Do you ask different mentors for each opportunity, or do you ask those same mentors if they could support you in these 2 or 3 opportunities? If so, How do you go about speaking with your mentors about this, especially because there are many amazing opportunities to study abroad? How do you go about showing this passion without appearing inconsistent?
No, that's such a great question. Excellent question. I think one that I should cover. So yeah, to be honest, it's surprisingly not the ones with the fanciest titles. It's the ones that could genuinely speak about your work in a very personal way. So you have to make sure you know how to gauge that, I believe, or find that. And I think once before I approach anybody, I make sure that I have many things already prepared. So I don't just go and be like, hey, I'm thinking of this opportunity. Can you write my letter? Thank you so much. No, not at all. So what I have prepared is kind of they don't have to use it if they don't want to, but bullet points of what I would want the letter to mention, if like for them to consider it. And I always leave it up to them, whatever they want. But some people appreciate that, that they don't know where to start, but if they have some sort of structure and maybe you have some suggestions of things that you'd want mentioned, then they could consider it. That doesn't mean it will be in the final letter, but it means they could consider it. So I have those bullet points, and then I have my resume ready for them to see, and I highlight the things that we've worked together. Okay, so we worked together, you probably won't remember, but in this and this and this project. And then after that, I have a link to the application and the deadline. And so I when I approach them, I have everything ready in that sense. And so I usually select people who I believe have known me personally, and then I would ask them very genuinely, like, I know you're very busy, but I really would like to apply for this. I'm telling you maybe a month in advance. I would love your support. I've prepared all this. Is this possible? And the majority will say yes. But then the problem becomes like following up, so making sure that you're following up, even if maybe have a talk or discussion about um why you want to study abroad. It's not just something suddenly, oh, there's so much money, I just want to go get out of this country. Not like that. You have some sort of purpose. Um and if you do so in a very genuine way, I think it's possible. I think also that you should have kind of a little group of advisors around you. So you should have at least maybe 8 people who will be there to support you. But be very selective about those 8 people. If they are, maybe you're applying for a fellowship in the environmental sector, then maybe your language arts teacher is okay, but they should connect it to the purpose of this environmental fellowship, right? So there should be some link and relevance. It's not just a random person that you've decided to ask. Another thing that is very important is that if it's in your field, it means people will know each other. So for example, if I say, oh, I've worked with this ambassador, I've worked with this diplomat and ambassador might know this of the friend of this other person who can check, and it's not stretching the truth, but being very frank about what you've done. If you've mostly done notes, then you're not gonna put it as like, and I've like helped create this core document that the ambassador or diplomat uses. No, like, you can be very honest. I've done these notes, but these are the skills that have come out of these notes, so because people will verify and people will check, and if they find that your application has some sort of inconsistency and that shows in the recommendation, then your legitimacy will be gone, right? So those are the things that I try to do as best practice. But yeah, no, try to approach people, and also do so in a timely way. They're very busy people, so making sure that you tell them beforehand, sending them some friendly reminders. And some people show you their card, some people don't show you their card. That's up to them. But it's kind of, they do, and it's possible that they don't as well, and you should understand that. And about showing your passion without being inconsistent, I think like, one quote that my professor says always is like, every interaction in life is an interview. And it's very interesting because I've been interviewed without knowing I'm being interviewed, to be honest. Opportunities come about when people just know you, want to know you, talk to you, and then they're like, okay, let's do this together. And I just thought it was a friendly chat, but it wasn't. So always be prepared. Always do your homework in advance. So when you want to show your passion, a big part of that is show responsibility and doing the work. Don't just show up to an event like, and this is what happened actually with Dr. Hasegawa. He was talking about the I think Rwanda, and he told me to read 4 articles, and I just read 1 or 2, and then he called me out on it, and he said, you haven't done your homework. You're not taking this opportunity seriously, Elizabeth. And it was like a big slap on the face, because it was like, yeah, I wasn't. I think I was like prioritizing other things when somebody like that has put trust in me. So making sure that you don't lose the persona, right? So if I write a recommendation and I think you're responsible and things like that, make sure you don't ruin that. Follow up with the deadlines, uh, um follow up with whatever the person is asking you and things like that. So I know that was very long, but I hope that makes sense. But finding the people that I think will write your letter is very important. Sometimes one of my letters was like 5 pages and others were like 2 paragraphs. So I don't think length is a testament of who you are, but maybe somebody who you feel comfortable writing at least a page or two, and is super enthusiastic to help you and support you. I think those are the best people, and you find those by giving them something, at least, helping them, supporting them in some way, and engaging in some sort of mentorship process where they get to know you a little bit more. um yeah, the last thing I want to say, I know we're out of time already, but
No, it's fine. We can
uh
stay for a couple of minutes more.
just for a little bit, but there is this it's not my theory, but we often use the word mentor, right? We say, oh, I have this mentor, I have that mentor, but there was this really cool framework that came out that said that you don't really have a mentor, you have 5 kinds of different people. You have a coach, that motivates you emotionally. They could be good recommended letters, but not academic ones. You have the advisor. These are people you don't get emotional with. You just, I have this problem, should I do A or B? And they tell you should do B for these reasons. They advise you. Then the third kind is more like just somebody you can lean on. So those are more, you tell them and they hug you and they're like, oh, it's gonna be okay, we can move forward with it. They're more of cheerleader kind of mentors than anything. And then the other kind are the I think are the sponsors. And so I think these are important. They're the ones who offer you opportunities. So if you're not in the room, they're the ones who are like, oh, I should nominate this guy. I think we should consider this person for an offer. They're the persons who put your name out there. And if somebody's talking bad about you, they're the people saying, actually, no, I know my judge very well. This is not him. And I think we should not make those judgments. They're the people behind the scenes who would stand up for you. So those are very precious to have. And those would be perfect recommendation letters, recommendation letter people. And there's 2 other ones as well, I can't remember. But think about that and maybe kind of identify those people before it's too late. Yeah, I think it's usually 2 academic, 2 personal, or it's either 3 academic and 1 personal. So it always changes. That's all. Sorry.
Thank you so much. It's yeah, we are a little over 1 hour, but this is perfectly fine. We learned a lot today. So okay. Okay, so if this is all from you, I asked everything I wanted to know. I hope our participants also did learn something interesting today. I'm sure they did. So let me just at the end. Elizabeth already gave an amazing advertisement of our organization, Global Society, but mm, yeah, there is a question. How can we find information about Global Society? So here in the chat, and for YouTube viewers, I will put it in the video description. I'm giving you some links to our social media channels where you can see some materials about our activities, upcoming activities, hopefully, and our mission. So as I said at the start, we are an NGO that wants to promote global education and intercultural communication, mainly in Poland. We are based in Poland, but we are open for everybody in the world. So feel free to join our future events. This is our first meeting. So Elizabeth, thank you one more time for being our first speaker. It was a great honor to have you here today. Thank you for everybody who participated today. To be honest, I was a little worried till the last moment how many people will actually join today, but we had an audience and we got a lot of questions, so we could have a valuable conversation. So thank you so much, and hopefully see you soon.
Yes, thank you everyone for coming, and look forward to staying in touch. Take care.